Greetings to all my viewers and welcome back to our journey through the 1962 war. So far, we've walked through the desperate battles of Nam Ka Chu and the heroic last stands at Walong, where Indian soldiers fought with unmatched bravery against impossible odds. We saw courage shine, even as leadership faltered and tragedy unfolded. Today, we move west to the towering ridges of Sela, the so-called fortress of the Himalayas. A natural stronghold, Sela was meant to block the Chinese advance into the heart of Arunachal. But as history would show, even the strongest fortress can fall if the men at the top lose their nerve. This is Chapter 10, Part 1, Fortress Sela. Without further ado, let's begin today's journey. By the end of October 1962, the disaster at Nam Ka Chu had shaken the entire nation. In just 3 hours, 7 Infantry Brigade was destroyed. Only the men of 2 Rajput held their ground. The rest were cut down, scattered, or forced to flee. Survivors struggled through freezing nights with no food, no supplies. Some collapsing in the snow, others captured while escaping through Bhutan. Nam Ka Chu was the first great blow of the war, and its shockwaves now carried us west, towards Sela, the so-called fortress of the Himalayas. After Nam Ka Chu, the Chinese swept down the Nyamjung Valley, overrunning 4 Division headquarters. There was no plan for withdrawal. What should have been an organized retreat turned into a desperate rout. Tawang, a fortress built over 3 years and declared vital ground, was abandoned within hours, even before a single shot was fired at Bomdila. Eastern Army Commander Lieutenant General Bogi Sen arrived in Tawang on 22 to 23 October. He dismissed GOC Niranjan Prasad, but took no steps to stop the evacuation. Tawang fell without a fight, and the road to Sela now lay open. With Tawang lost, the debate turned fierce. Eastern Command wanted to fall back all the way to Bomdila. But in Delhi, Brigadier D.K. Palit, the Director of Military Operations, argued that the stand must be made at Sela. On 25th October, the new corps commander, Lieutenant General Harbaksh Singh, climbed to Sela top with Major General Anant Pathania. At 13,400 feet, in freezing winds and snow, the decision was made Sela would be the fortress to stop the Chinese. Soon, fresh units began arriving, 1 Sikh, 4 Garhwal rifles, 13 Dogra, and the 2nd and 4th Sikh Light Infantry. The so-called fortress was now manned. But whether it could hold was another matter. On 30th October 1962, a new wave of whispers moved through the camps and headquarters. General B.M. Bijji Kaul was back. After weeks of illness, he was declared medically fit and reinstated as GOC of 4 Corps. For the men on the ground, it meant change yet again. Lieutenant General Harbaksh Singh, who had just begun to steady the command, was ordered to move out. But what followed shocked many senior officers. Instead of taking Harbaksh's detailed briefing on the situation at Sela, Kaul brushed it aside. He placed his full faith in the plan pushed by Brigadier D.K. Palit to make Sela the fortress line. Ironically, this was the very idea Kaul had opposed earlier, arguing that defending such extreme heights was unrealistic. Now, there was no going back. The decision was sealed. But by this time, winter had already tightened its grip. At 13,400 feet, the men of Sela battled, not just the enemy, but the mountains themselves. Snowstorms buried bunkers, blizzards cut supply lines, and icy vines left men half-frozen even before the battle began. The fortress of Sela was in place, but the cracks were already showing. As the blizzards grew harsher, the strain of holding command at 13,400 feet became too much for Major General Anant Pathania. Quietly, and without informing Eastern Command or Army Headquarters, he moved the 4 Division HQ from Senj Dzong down to Dirang Dzong, nearly 7,000 feet lower. This single decision left 62 Brigade, tasked with holding Sela, dangerously isolated. Cut off from higher leadership, the so-called fortress was now a frontline outpost, fighting both the enemy and the elements on its own. Reinforcements did arrive, but they came ill-prepared. Men stood shivering in thin uniforms, short of blankets, without proper digging tools, and lacking even basic signals equipment. Supplies were dropped by the IAF's Dakotas and Otters, but much of it was scattered or lost in the snow. Sela was being built as a fortress, but its defenders were left with little more than courage to keep them warm. Amidst all the confusion at higher headquarters, one man gave the soldiers at Sela hope: Brigadier Hoshiar Singh, commander of 62 Brigade. Calm, confident, and determined, he declared that Sela would be made an impregnable fortress. Day after day, men hacked at frozen ground with bare hands and crude tools, stacking stones and logs into bunkers and sangars. By 15th November, the defences were ready. Under Lieutenant Colonel Budhwar, artillery was brought forward, 25-pounders, 3.7-inch howitzers, and mortars positioned to cover every approach. To the men, it looked formidable, but the truth was harder. Sela had barely 2/3 of the infantry it needed, and only 1/3 of the required artillery. The fortress had been built, but whether it could withstand the storm was still in doubt. For days, the front grew strangely quiet. The Chinese stayed north of the Tawang Chu, and, to many, it felt like the storm had passed. General B.M. Kaul convinced himself the war was over for the season. He told his officers that nothing would happen until the spring of 1963, even scolding some for wasting time on defenses instead of stocking up on winter rations. As a result, minefields were barely laid, barbed wire left incomplete. The so-called fortress still had open gaps. But across the valley, the enemy was not resting. Night after night, Chinese convoys moved with headlights blazing. Bulldozers and labor battalions cut new tracks, linking Bomdila to Tawang in record time. The Indians waited in the snow. The Chinese built the road to victory. Between the 1st and 13th November, the silence at Sela broke in sudden flashes of violence. A patrol of 4 Garhwal, led by Major H. B. Rail, tried to destroy the Lao footbridge, but the mission failed. Soon after, 2 Sikh light infantry, under Captain M. K. Saxena, ran into a Chinese ambush. 2 men were killed, their rifles captured, and Saxena himself was left frostbitten in the snow. Reports grew darker. 1 Sikh spotted more than 500 Chinese near Lunguthang, and days later, a 200-strong enemy force intercepted them, confirming the worst fears. Meanwhile, for Garhwal observed long mule and yak convoys snaking through the mountains, carrying supplies. The message was clear. The Chinese weren't retreating. They were preparing for something much bigger. By 10th November, tension inside Sela was at breaking point. The men had endured sleepless nights in freezing winds, listening for enemy movement in the dark valleys below. That night, the inevitable happened. A small Chinese jitter party, just a probing patrol meant to test Indian nerves, was spotted near the wire. In the confusion, the men of 1 Sikh believed it was the start of a full-scale assault. Within seconds, rifles cracked, mortars thundered, and even field guns joined in. For nearly 2 hours, shells rained into the mist, lighting up empty ridgelines. When dawn broke, there was nothing. No Chinese dead, no attack. Only precious ammunition wasted and morale badly shaken. Still, Brigadier Hoshiar Singh refused to let doubt take over. Walking from bunker to bunker, he calmed the soldiers and spoke with quiet conviction. Sela would hold. To stiffen resolve, he even announced a prize, 1,000 rupees to any man who captured a Chinese alive. The fortress still stood unbroken, but the cracks were beginning to show, not in the walls of stone, but in the minds of the men inside. On 13th November, the defenders of Sela finally struck back. Lieutenant Vinod Kumar Goswami of 4 Garhwal Rifles led a daring patrol deep into the Mego area. At twilight, they spotted nearly 20 Chinese gathered around a hut. Moving with stealth, Goswami's men silenced a sentry and drag him away as a prisoner. But before they could escape, the patrol was discovered. Gunfire erupted across the valley. Surrounded and under heavy fire, Goswami made a split-second decision. He killed the prisoner to prevent his rescue, and then fought his way back with his men. Exhausted but alive, the Garhwalis reached Brigade HQ. With them came the prisoner's rifle, the first tangible trophy from Sela, proof that the Indians could strike back even in the enemy's shadow. It was a small victory, but in a fortress filled with doubt, it gave the men hope. On 15th November, Brigadier Hoshiar Singh launched a bold raid, Operation Kaua, the Crow, a mixed force of 1 Sikh and 2 Sikh light infantry, led by Major S.S. Jaspal, set out toward Lunguthang. But the Chinese were waiting. At 2 a.m., nearly 600 troops attacked in waves. Radios failed, the firm base was already lost, and a patrol collapsed in chaos. Lieutenant M.S. Khera and over 60 men were killed or missing. By dawn, shattered survivors struggled back. Operation Kaua was meant to inspire confidence. Instead, it left Sela weaker than ever. As the shattered remnants of Operation Kaua limped back into Sela, the scale of the threat became clear. Patrols of 4 Sikh light infantry reported seeing more than 1,000 Chinese troops massing along the Bhutan border. Indian artillery tried to break up the gatherings, but thick mist and broken terrain saved the enemy from serious losses. By evening, the signs grew darker. The Garhwalis confirmed heavy concentrations of Chinese across the Tawang Chu valley, campfires glowing like a chain of stars on the far slopes. From their posts, Indian sentries watched in silence as the enemy moved with chilling confidence. That night, the truth could no longer be denied. Headlights blazed at Bridge 4, where Chinese engineers worked openly to repair crossings, their convoy stretching endlessly into the darkness. For the men of Sela, the message was clear. The Chinese weren't just preparing for another skirmish, they were building the stage for a decisive assault. The fortress would soon be tested to its very limits. And with that, friends, we come to the close of Chapter 10, Part 1, Fortress Sela. We saw how the disaster at Nam Ka Chu and the collapse at Tawang forced the Indian army to declare Sela as the new fortress line. Brigadier Hoshiar Singh and his men worked tirelessly, carving bunkers from frozen ground and preparing for the fight ahead. But as we learned, the fortress was not as strong as it appeared. Shortages, poor planning, and confused leadership left Sela dangerously exposed. Meanwhile, the Chinese built roads, massed troops, and waited for the right moment to strike. The stage is set. The calm before the storm is over. In the next part, we will witness how this fortress faced its ultimate test. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And if you are enjoying this journey, please do like, share, and subscribe to support our work. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and Jai Hind.